The Sentinel is known to be reliable, fearless, disciplined, consistent, courageous, motivated, and skillful.
So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances.
All these qualities start from the mind. Your mind can be your worst enemy or your most powerful weapon.
The world becomes your library to help you to become better at your craft.
Is this the dagger?
Learn how to achieve greatness and tap into the Sentinel mindset.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful special edition of the Sentinel Mindset. Very excited today because this is going to be a first. I mean, we've had different levels of law enforcement here in the past, but today we have a very, very special guest. We have Chief of Police Stephen Tanner of the Halton Regional Police. Thank you so much for coming down.
No, thank you. It is so great to be here and meet you guys. And you know what? Sky's the limit. There's so many things to talk about. It's an amazing world out there.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely. Amazing. And fun facts are going to come out right now. Mike, why don't we, because you also were privy to some research that we did.
Our intel department fed us a plethora of
never know
information.
what's in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess officially as of January 2022, you will have served 20 years as a chief of police, covering 3 services, which was Belleville, Kingston, and Halton.
Yeah, that's right.
And that makes you essentially officially, and we say it now for the first time ever,
yes,
for outside audiences, to be the longest serving chief of police in Canada, active.
Yeah, that's my understanding. There was one fellow who had seniority on me, Chief Smith in Charlottetown, PEI.
And we helped take him out. We took him
finally,
out.
Thank you. Yeah, he finally succumbed to you guys and retired in April, I think it was. So I've thanked him. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting title. You know, it was 20 years ago, I was the youngest chief in Canada. And now all of a sudden I am the longest serving. So something happens in between there, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So being in this position for so long, I'm pretty sure you've seen lots of changes over the last 20 years. What would be some things that you have found as I guess the biggest challenge through all these changes? I mean, obviously we're all growing and evolving, and technology and all this. What are some challenges that you've from the surface?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm in my 40th year in policing. Started in 1982, 20 years as a chief almost. And it's all about relationships, first of all. It has been from the start. And that's what makes you successful as a frontline patrol officer. That's what makes you successful as a chief. It's all interpersonal skills and authenticity. But what's changed a lot is people's mindset, and we talk about mindset here on the show, and we're dealing with now probably the 4th generation of police officers that I've been involved with, and our young officers coming in have different expectations.
Right.
So the profession has to evolve to meet their needs and their wants and desires. Also their work-life balance, which is very different than most of us were in the 1980s and 90s, where it was all about teamwork and forget the family, get to work, you've got a job to do. Now it's work-life balance. So there's a side of it that's very good.
That's a huge shift. That's a big shift.
Absolutely. And it's good on the individual side. People need to look after themselves.
Self-care, as they say.
Sometimes it's difficult on the organizational side because we come with different issues. We come with post-traumatic stress disorder, terms that we never talked about in the 1980s. And I think another thing that's changed really a lot over the years is public expectation, but it should. I've always said we are given a lot of power and authority in society, so we need to deserve that. And we need the public to realize that they can trust us when we're given those powers and authorities. So that's where we've seen a lot. I mean, the George Floyd tragedy was just horrendous. Mm-hmm. Shook the world, and it shook the policing world, as it should. But there is a lot of good work being done as well. So we need to focus on the good and deal with the bad, and deal with the changes that are coming in society. And there's a lot of them.
That's a great point, because if it was a huge shadow, there are shining aspects of policing that need to grow, right? They need to get better and become like the norm. I mean, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was it that, 1982 was the first year of service?
That's right.
What was it that in you that said, I want to get into policing, just to start off the career?
Yeah, you know what? I think we're all different. Some people, from the time they were 5 years old, wanted to be a police officer. I went to the University of Guelph. I was planning to be a veterinarian, of all things.
Hey, nice.
Met two wonderful four-legged creatures downstairs. Had a little bit of an encounter with one of them. But it just didn't happen. It was, and I looked at law school and medical school, and I thought about the legal profession, and I thought, well, for some reason, as a 21-year-old, I couldn't see myself being a lawyer. Maybe a Crown attorney, district attorney. We watched the movies.
Right.
At the time, policing and our Crown attorneys wasn't that much different salary-wise. And I had about enough of school. And I applied to 3 police departments. And Halton, my hometown, was Oakville. Halton just happened to hire me before Peel and the OPP at the time. And I went there, and I've just loved it. I've loved the teamwork, camaraderie, but the fact that you are helping victims, and I think that's a part of the mindset that helped me get through some of the toughest days in policing and dealing with victims and the victims' families from Paul Bernardo back in the day in Halton when I was still there.
Yes.
Nina de Villiers, who was murdered, and Priscilla went on to do a lot of
high-profile cases,
advocate
yes.
things. But you're still there representing the victim, and no one else can speak for those victims of homicide and sexual assault, and so you kind of deal with it in that way. Mm-hmm. Some other people can't deal with it that way, and it ends up causing mental health issues, and we need to do a better job of dealing with those instances as well.
Right.
Yeah, I say it's actually pretty amazing. You've been in policing for that long, and you have like a great energy about you, like a great attitude. You can see it.
Mike, it's funny you're saying that, because as I'm talking to you, like the vibes that I'm getting from you is like a fatherly figure, just giving words of wisdom. Like that's what I'm sensing from you, just everything about you.
But there's a warmth about it.
There is a warmth.
Because someone can give that wisdom, but it's cold. It's just like ruthless, black and white. Like, I think it's amazing that you've been through so much. You've seen so many things. You've experienced so much. And you can still, I think it's like a victory or a great testimony for someone in policing.
Right.
That, because in contrast to what you said about mental illness and broken marriages and all the other things that, substance abuse from cops themselves, to have you kind of, you're obviously not unscathed, right?
Yep.
You've probably been through some really difficult times, but I think, why the warmth? Where's it coming from? Literally, and I ask it like in the most respectful way.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's a good question. Some of it's probably genetics, a little bit. There's always that nature-nurture sort of dichotomy, right? But my father was a very warm, caring, more emotional sort of person, and some people would see that as a weakness back then. And maybe that's where. I've done a lot of reading. I went back and did my master's degree and things, but there's one book that always has stood out. It's called I think it's The Power of Authenticity. But it's all about just being true, right? And how people know the difference when they meet you or when you're dealing with them. So one of the examples in the book is, don't be the person that says to someone in the hall in the morning, "How are you doing?" and you keep walking and you don't even wait for the answer, right?
We've all done that.
People see through that.
That's
right?
right.
If you're going to ask, actually care. And I think that's where some of our push and my push for organizational wellness has been important. Setting up an organizational wellness unit full-time to deal with our officers' needs, not because it's like some checkbox, but because that's what we actually should be doing.
Right.
We need people to go home from work as healthy mentally and otherwise as they came to work, as much as we can. So we've got to put the things in place. And some police services still need to work more on that.
Yeah, that's great. The whole adage, faithful with little and being, be given more responsibility. We talk about that a lot. Someone wants something greater, but they're not there for the small things. So I think, if you're going to be, that's great. The power of authenticity. I'm going to look it up. I've never heard of that. But if you're authentic with that person in that moment in that conversation, it is what you'll need if you're looking after the community, right?
Absolutely.
So, versus the person who's like, I don't have time. I have to take care of everybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's amazing also what you're saying is, as the chief of police, that is like the highest level of leadership in the organization. And we speak about leadership here, Chief Tanner, all the time about, what a leader is. And we always say a leader is someone who serves others, but shows them a better way as well.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times I find that people wanting to kind of grow in the ladder of any organization, especially when it comes to leadership, I guess struggle with what that is. What was it for you that made you pivot from, as a constable into such a high level of leadership, and what kind of tactics did you use, or methods did you use to help you just do it well?
Yeah, I think for anyone that's looking, well, whatever your career aspirations are, because they change, right? I think early on when I met the chief of police in Halton, Jim Harding at the time, he was a pretty impressive person. Actually, ironically, he had come to us from Peel. Now we've gone the other way, and I say taken over Peel, Halton East. We can talk about Nish and the fabulous team he's developing there.
Yeah.
But I think when I started to look at promotions, there is a part of it that's it's an ego thing. It's a satisfaction. It's I've got to this level. It's the competitive nature of most of us being A-type personalities to some degree. But the other part that's more important is realizing, I think, that whatever level you do aspire or get to, if you're doing it so that you can make more of a difference or a positive impact at that level, that's what really drives you. So it is really different how it happened for me. I was a sergeant in Halton, a polygraph examiner, sitting in the homicide office, dealing with lots of different things. Dream jobs, intelligence, drugs, all those things were what I really wanted to do. And an opportunity came up to be a deputy chief in Guelph. And I had just started a master's degree. That was kind of unique at the time. Now it's almost the new bachelor's degree. Right. But at the time I became the master's student who applied, and I got this position in Guelph. 38 years old as a deputy chief in a city where I had gone to university, which was a little ironic. But you realize that you could make more difference at those levels, and then the moves to Belleville and Kingston happened. But as a chief, it's kind of deputy chiefs might have the best jobs because they get to do a whole bunch of really cool things and have a lot of positive influence. And they can also say, oh, hang on a second, I'll go check with the chief. And you can blame the chief for...
They have a lifeline of some
Yeah,
degree,
there's
right?
kind of a, here's the question of last resort. So,
Yeah.
But as a chief, you can actually make those differences and say, you know what, no, next week, let's do it this way because that's the right way to do it. And other than police services boards and the relationships you need there, of course, on the political side. But you have the power to make more difference because of what you've done to get there yourself.
Right.
And that's why I'm not tired of it after 20 years. Like, it's still
Yeah, I think that's what we picked
the
up.
fun part.
You
right?
don't seem fatigued or worn down, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's like a
Yeah.
freshness, which is amazing. What would you say? These sense of accomplishments that people might measure and be like, okay, I got these notches on the belt, I'm moving up. It seems like you don't really care about that so much. What has been kind of like the most rewarding aspect of being a chief of police for this long? When you
know what? I think the most rewarding part right now is knowing and hearing from our members that some of the things we put in place for them are having a positive impact: organizational wellness, mental health. On the community side, it's the relationships. And when I talk about relationships and that authenticity that you need, that helps with police associations when you're dealing with them. I used to be the chair of the Halton Police Association. That's probably one of the biggest learning moments for me. And also something that's helped open doors with every police union president and leader that I've dealt with in the last 20 years is, look, I was in your seat, right? I know what you're here for. You're representing everybody. You're trying to do the right thing. And 95% of the time, we can reach agreement on stuff. Once in a while, we can't. We have to agree to disagree, and we'll deal with it. But it's how you can make that positive difference, no matter what your role is. And I found that, I was going to say, with our diversity, our diverse communities within Halton, there's a lot of disparity in the world these days. There's a lot of racism and discrimination, and we've had a long-standing multicultural committee, Chiefs Diversity Forum, we call it. And we've got such tremendous positive relationships built there that when things do happen, they come to support us as opposed to the alternative.
Yeah. Can you speak to that? I think
Absolutely.
you're probably really great to answer this. We say the word diversity, right? And it can't be charitable, right? You know, it's almost we get it, we understand. Like, look, I come from a diverse background myself. Grew up with a lot of people who are in that sect of our demographic. But at the end of the day, it should not be charitable. No one wants to. I had a buddy growing up, and he said, like, look, my dad, he does nothing. They just gave him this job. They don't listen to anything he says, but he is the token, and then fill in the blank. Okay, and he's like, I don't ever want to be that person. I want to earn my spot and contribute. So diversity, when you look at it, it is great. What do you think the best expression of diversity, when it organically happens, and the opportunities are there because nothing else is systemically impeding it? Let's get rid of all that stuff. Yeah. Why is diversity important?
You know what? I honestly think it makes us better. 99.9% of everybody, no matter what your background is, are good people or want to be good people.
Yeah, very true.
There's 0.1 that we need to put in jail for a long time and keep them there.
Yeah.
But diversity, it's almost got to a point where we're afraid to say some words, right?
Yes.
Like, is black the right word? Is Middle Eastern the right word? Asian, LGBTQ. Really, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And it's a little bit corny, but the skeleton sort of thing, here's what we all really look like on the inside.
Right.
Yeah.
This is just skin pigmentation and life experiences are totally different for some people. I just said that to our Women's Internal Support Network the other day. We had 133 women together for 2 days. It's the first time, especially since COVID. Mm-hmm. And I said, I've never lived your experience. I've never been sexually harassed at work or because you're a police officer or not. So the diversity is what makes us richer. And I'll tell you, I've said this a lot of times. I went to high school in Oakville, Purdue High School. It's not there anymore. It's now a St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic school. Mm-hmm. There were 2 black kids in school with me, Gary and Kathy, and I knew them both, right? And Oakville was very undiverse. Mm-hmm. When I moved to Belleville in 2000, my older son was, or just after, he went into high school, did his high school there. There were 2 black kids in the high school in Belleville, Quinte Secondary School, and I thought the one thing that I robbed them of by moving to Belleville and Kingston was the diverse experience if they had still been in Oakville or Toronto.
Yes.
Now my older son's a police officer in Ontario and deals with diversity issues all the time on a frontline capacity, but you actually lose that. Eastern Ontario is still much less diverse than anywhere around the GTA, but it's actually it's a bonus to us here instead of a negative thing. It's a richness. We just need to learn how to live together and how to treat people with respect. And as long as we're looking at people as people, gang stuff aside, that's where we need to be.
Yes, great richness. That's a great way of describing it. That's what it offers.
Absolutely.
Right?
It really is. When you look at the evolution over the last 30 years, I mean, we talked about this very, very briefly outside. A lot has changed from the 70s, 80s, 90s to what we are as people now. I mean, for myself, as an example, like I got married when I was 21 years old. And, now if I look at a 21-year-old, I'm like, I can't see that person like married, let alone tying their shoelace right now. Like a lot of times, right? Yeah. So when you see that, also what's changed is, as we said very briefly right now, the mindset. And we find a lot of people, they see a product or a final product and they say, I want to do that. So again, in the security industry, a lot of our people that come in aspire to be police officers. And they're basically saying, look, I want to be a police officer. But a lot of it, the mindset to get them there is the big disconnect. So what we like to do is help develop them to get there. What would you say are some things that, people should be doing if they do want to get into policing, that they should be preparing their mind? And also, I guess, kind of crafting their work ethic in as you said, the little that we do now before you get to the lots. What should they be doing to prepare themselves for a potential career in policing or to be successful to get into that?
Yeah, it has changed a lot, right? And I think 1982, there were 12 of us that started the same day. 6 of us had university, 3 had community college, military, whatever. Now it's almost 100% at least university or college.
Right.
But that's just the starting point because it's it's communication skills. I worry about our youth. We touched on it just quickly outside. They're great texters.
Right.
Can they talk to people?
Right.
Can they read body language? I mean, it is,
I know.
90% of our communications is body language. It's not verbal. And that's not just a polygraph guy
Right.
talking. It's where we actually are. I've seen my older son when he was a teenager texting his girlfriend and watching a hockey game and saying, well, why would I get on the phone? I'm watching the hockey game.
Right.
And so there is a disconnect from technology as well as it helps us Google things.
Right.
But I think that it's the interpersonal skills and it's the maturity on how a young person now reaches the maturity level that they're going to need to be a police officer. But I think we've also got to flip another switch sometimes. And for many years, it's been, well, the average constable recruit at the Ontario Police College right now, I think, is still 28. So there are some 22-year-olds, but there's some 46-year-olds. That's okay. The door should be open for everybody. But we put someone in our Canadian military and send them to Afghanistan potentially when they're 18 or 19, and we think they need to be 28 to deal with people in Toronto or Oakville or Durham region.
Right.
And I think we need to hire younger people sometimes and build them up from the beginning.
Develop them.
Help them develop as individuals and help them develop as professional police officers. Sometimes I think, not always, sometimes we hire older people, bank managers, social worker, whatever, great people, but also maybe set in their ways in some different ways. So it's a real rich mixture that we need when it comes to recruiting and to what makes somebody successful in policing. Really, a lot of it comes down to mindset, absolutely, interpersonal communication skills, authenticity, and teamwork. No police officer should be out there or feel they're out there on their own. It's part of a bigger team, which we only exist for safety and security of the people we serve.
That's really good, man.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying, Chief Tanner, earlier about how things have changed where everyone was about the force, right? Okay. And, snowstorm, as we talked about in previous podcasts, some type of emergency. Not all police, and we've been told this, have just risen to the challenge. Okay. Part of it is because everyone is more in tune with themselves. They know their why. I'm passionate about ukulele. Okay. As soon as I'm done my shift, that ukulele's out.
Yeah.
And I'm playing it on the drive home. Okay, whatever.
And the passengers.
Yeah, exactly. Uber.
Yeah.
Okay. But I say that. But what we've also seen is where, again, the strength of team, because everyone was always about that collective. And there was, that voice as a collective was maybe a dominant voice before. Now everyone's kind of growing in their individual voice, which is good.
Yep.
Where do you think this now lands us? Because if things are kind of settling, we don't want to be in ditch to ditch, because when it's a collective, someone could really be suffering, but no one would know. Someone could really be falling behind, and it's just like, pull up your boots, get up, get with the team. Okay, we're a way more sensitive work environment right now. We have conversations where before we're like, look, we would never have this conversation. It's just show up to shift, get it done, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see that blend? And I say it because we've seen in our own teams, some people get team. They have sport. They're one of 7 siblings. Whatever dynamic it is, they understand they are one of, and they know how to kind of move with the group. Others now we're seeing more often have that individual voice, which is great. Okay, and we want to be careful to not squash it. I would like to just get your insight. How does it settle into something where they can be fully them and fully a part of the team?
Yeah, and it's a fine balance, right? And it's, as I say, and the deputies and I all say to our new recruits when we meet them, and we meet everyone in their first week or so, and then when they come back from the police college, you were hired because of the person you are. So we don't necessarily want you to all change and become the same.
Can you say that again? That's a great line, right? I think that's really good to know, right?
Yeah.
Because some people change themselves just to be hired.
Absolutely.
Right,
And we hire for diversity, so why would we want them to all change? And, all of our 60 recruits we hired last year, I don't want them to go out and shave their heads and try to act tough, right? It's they're all there for different reasons and for good reasons. So hang on to your individuality and your personalities and look after yourself. At the same time, there's something greater than the individual, which is what the police service has to do. And there's all those things, right? There's only one chance to make a first impression. So anyone can go out. We know this. Police officers here in Toronto do a fabulous job day in and day out. And then on Friday night, somebody goes out, something really bad happens, maybe that should never have happened. More often than not, it's on video and all sorts of things these days. So be aware of those things. I say to our recruits, just assume you are on video 24 hours a day, especially the 12 hours you're working.
That's wise.
But probably 24.
Yeah.
So stay an individual, keep the focus of the team, because you need to rely on each other. It's not like a battalion in a war going together, and absolutely, you're depending on who's shooting in what direction.
Yes.
It's about looking after each other, caring legitimately about each other, even if you may be different people, and getting the best job done that we are paid quite well for in society these days. And it's an honor to do it. So if we can make a difference in someone's life, no matter how simple it is, they're out on the street, right? The fabulous pictures of officer tying a homeless person's shoes or helping a young boy with a stolen bike. Those are all good things. And they'll help us when some of the bad things happen, but we do them for the right reason.
Yeah, sure. And then when that team gets tested, you band together, right? Because you've gone through difficult things. It's amazing how going through the trenches with someone, even, people who are at odds with each other, they now become brothers or brother and sister.
Absolutely.
It's just like,
And as you said, we put some things in place now to look after people differently. There's some Project Safeguard we use for some of our high-risk officers. But, in the last couple of months, we have had some tragic teenage suicides, and our officers have dealt with them. So, yes, there's organizational wellness. There's also the supervisors getting those people together to make sure they're okay. And probably in the mid-1980s, it was, that was really bad. Now go do this. Now we really have to legitimately be the caring organization, internal and external, and mean it on both sides.
Yeah. You think it's possible? You think that police can make and affect a lot of change? And what I love what you said kind of earlier, they have this responsibility. Now they need to exhibit that they're deserving of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great way of describing it versus, you got the badge. They should respect you. Right?
Well, it's there's a whole bunch of little sayings we use and over the years, but it's like if you have kids and one of your kids does something wrong, you're disappointed, and there might be some kind of discipline, depending on what that is, whatever the situation was. And then you get on with things and you reward them when the behavior is good. And you're trusting of them and you want the best, right? And it's not like every police officer become our children. They do to some degree. But we want the same for them, right? So there's going to be some mess ups. If they're really bad, we'll deal with them. People may be terminated from the service if it's serious enough. Demoted, disciplined. Or let's deal with this, let's explain to the public what happened, and let's get on with it and prove that we deserve the trust that we do deserve as a whole.
Yeah. We see a lot of people that come through our organization trying to get a job with our company, and I would probably say we have very, very strong filters to make sure that we only bring in like literally the best. And when we're searching people to come in, a lot of things that you're saying is resonating with me. For example, as much as people think having maybe schooling in law enforcement and maybe a security background, that is the gateway ticket to getting in. We found a lot of our success also came from people that, as you said, may have had university in something else. Maybe a social worker. We've had teachers on our roster. We've had social workers on our roster. We've had, even like first responders and EMS or firefighters on our roster. And again, for us, we look at it, it's just more their thinking. And one of the things that we always kind of preach about, Chief, is the humility element. Where having the ability to have, like, humility for us is having a teachable spirit where we can kind of pour into you. And as long as you're open, you'll be able to adapt and just get poured into so you can potentially, execute to the best that you can possibly do it. How important would you say humility is in policing?
That's a great question.
Absolutely. I mean, because you're in a position of authority. You're given tremendous powers up to and including taking a human life if necessary to preserve life or to protect yourself. So there's tremendous power, and if you don't have humility in all the duties that you're performing, those are going to be issues. And I think when you talk about recruits or when you're recruiting, education is not the be-all and end-all. I know people with master's degrees and all sorts of things, and I knew somebody that almost had a master's degree in emotional intelligence and was the most immature in that EQ measure that I could ever imagine.
Right.
Talked about it all the time.
Right.
Never showed it. Right.
Right.
You gotta love that.
So I think when you're looking at people coming in, education is just one stepping stone.
Okay.
Absolutely, any degree is important because really university is learning to learn. I went to University of Guelph for 4 years. I've probably never used anything that I actually learned in a university course, maybe a bit of psychology.
That's a free secret, kids. Right
Absolutely.
Learning to learn.
It's learning to learn, right?
Yeah.
And find a way to do that. And,
Right.
but you set the goal. And I know some people who have hit the post many times and are still trying to get into policing. Sometimes it's fitness. You know what? Push yourself a little harder. Fitness is something that most people can get to. Once in a while, not, and realize your shortcomings and find a way to, realize maybe there's another civilian position in policing or something else. But if it comes to preparing yourself, there's a lot of research you can do. There's people you can reach out to and talk to and get guidance on, interview processes. But it's very important, and I'll say this, for people who are working for you and your company, other security companies. I think out of our last group of recruits, 2 or 3 of them had experience working hospital security. Mm-hmm. What a fabulous experience, dealing in a hospital setting these days through COVID, mental health issues, fentanyl overdose, opioid overdose issues.
Yes.
Coming in every day, the experience is priceless.
And I don't know if you know this or not about us as a company, but up until COVID hit, we were in a company that specifically focused on corporate events and close protection. And when COVID wiped it all away, it put us in a position now where we said we have to put us in a place where we can become relevant again, especially through COVID. So we decided to put a bid into a healthcare environment, which is a hospital that we have right now. And to get us ready for that, we basically kind of put all our last chips into the board, and we had a core group of our people, and we put 500 hours of paid training to get them ready for healthcare.
Yeah.
And this is without even winning the contract. But we knew that to get them there,
It was a big risk.
that.
Yeah.
And it was a big learning curve because, we got stats jumping into healthcare that you're 3 times more likely to get assaulted in a healthcare environment than you would in many other environments.
It was in policing and corrections combined.
Yes.
So that was alarming to us. Those who work in healthcare, nurses predominantly,
Yes.
are 3 times more likely to be assaulted on the job than policing and corrections combined.
Yeah.
And when we were learning those, we saw, wow, they need really good people.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So we basically put everything in it. We brought in some of the best instructors and speakers to get us ready for the mindset, and we were successful. And that's an industry that we jumped into, and that has also been a big eye opener now because we're seeing how transferable the skills are. You can also get in a healthcare environment to kind of pass on to the day to day. The big word for 2020 for us was empathy. It was a huge word, and we had Dr. Brian Goldman on as well, who wrote a book on the
power of kindness.
Power of kindness.
Yeah.
And it's a huge tool that we use, and it's not just in healthcare, but when you can empathize with someone, it can just completely diffuse the situation because you're looking at it from their lens, right?
Which is obviously advantageous in policing, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Without empathy, what are you, right? I mean,
Right.
I say to people and our recruits and our supervisors, when you're dealing with someone, victims, families, children, accused persons, up to and including the worst, most horrific offender, there is still a space there to treat people fairly.
Yes.
You may do it for different reasons. It may pay dividends on an investigative side when you're dealing with a accused person in a homicide or an attempt murder.
Yes.
But you can still treat them fairly.
Okay.
We need to treat them fairly.
Yes.
If we don't, we're going to lose things at court or something else is going to happen anyway. But treat the person as a human being. You may not like them,
Right.
and there may be perfectly good reasons not to.
Yes.
But you can still treat them fairly, and you can still have that degree of empathy.
Yes.
To get the job done professionally.
Listen, that's great, and I want to tap into one area I'm going to call, before we walk into it, called street smarts. Before we do that, I don't know if you follow basketball or not, but yesterday we were my daughter, who's in rep, and her coach. We were at the Milwaukee Bucks game and the Raptors.
Good ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was surprised,
You're at the
actually,
game,
but I'm
yes.
happy.
Yeah.
So
That was a good game.
Yeah. So we were talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo, their star player, and just about how he is just. If you look at a lot of sports, high top level athletes, everything from the fame, the money, it can just kind of get to them. But the way he has composed himself, it's because he came from literally poverty,
Humble
He came from
beginnings.
humble beginnings, and what he came from, he's held on to, like, this is what I came from, this is what I have now, and because of that, he's just a genuinely amazing person, to just how he looks at life, and just how blessed he is. The humility is strong. Now,
And not adverse to hard work.
not adverse.
He loves hard work.
100%.
Which is incredible.
Now, I find we've had actually some success with a lot of our people that came from other countries like Brazil, or from the UK, from other countries that basically made it into policing, but they brought in as well that same thing. I came from this environment, which makes them very successful because they don't have this entitled element. They just say, like, I'm here to prove myself, and I'm here to do whatever I can, because back in my home country, there was bombs going off, or there was this or that.
Yeah, no opportunity.
No opportunity. So I find, and maybe you can kind of relate to this or not, with some of the recruits or people that you've seen over your career, but I find there's also an element of street smarts, meaning as in, like, there's something that the streets can teach you that can also help you look at things in a much better way that universities, for example, cannot, right? Have you seen any of that where, like, I mean, you can't teach street smarts, but you can put yourself in environments to kind of get
Street psychology.
Street
101.
psychology, yeah.
It's an interesting mindset thing, right? And that particular NBA star, my understanding from somebody in Milwaukee is he's looking after his whole family.
Yes.
In a large, beautiful condo, but mom and dad are there, and he's paying it back that way. But it's an interesting point when our officers are as fortunate as they are, and there are a lot of people that aren't lucky enough to become police officers, just don't make it through the processes for whatever reason. We have a lot that are thankful for what they do and enjoy the challenge and the opportunity and helping people. But there's also an opportunity when you are dealing with some of the things that you're dealing with. There's a side of it that, we all think this is going to get people down, right? Dealing with overdoses and attempt suicides and sexual assaults and murders and fentanyl and guns and gangs. There's also an opportunity to say, look at the people that we have a chance to help. Look at the terrible situation they're in.
Yeah.
I'm not in that situation. I'm coming in from outside in a fortunate sort of way as the helper and the provider and the safety and security person, enforcer sometimes, to learn from what other people are going through and remind yourself. And it's probably something we don't do often enough. Remind yourself how fortunate you are.
That's a great point.
where
You're basically saying that as hard as that situation is for you as a cop, it's just a moment.
Absolutely.
For them, it's this is their life. It could be their life day in, day out.
Right.
It needs all of you to go in, to not judge it, to not go in as an authority only, but to be empathetic and be like, how do I make that moment better? I mean, that's actually brilliant, because it's a great way to refocus that, this, domestic or whatever it is, it needs me, all of me to be, I guess, maybe the Sultan light to a degree, right? To really serve and protect here, and to have my wits about me, to not get fooled, to not be thinking about my lunch or, playing ukulele after a shift. Okay. You know what I mean? I got this picture. There is somebody out there who just loves it, right?
There must be.
They love
There
those
must
four
be.
strings. But I think, that's what it takes, right? It takes someone totally present who will say, I'm going to go into a really bad situation and I'm going to help it and I'm going to make it better. This is why, again, the self-care of cops, and this is why it matters, because there's going to be moments where it's going to take all of you.
Oh yeah, and it's okay to show emotions, right? It didn't used to be. Now it is much more so. And I also was going to say earlier, when we're building a system and we're trying to help our officers and our civilian people, because they're in some horrific situations as well, dispatchers and otherwise.
Yes.
While we're trying to help them to become more resilient, and we're saying it's okay to come forward when you have issues, don't be shocked when they come forward and they have issues. That's what we're building the system for. So, yeah, there are people that are alarmed. There was a report, I think, from the Provincial Auditor General about the OPP, and it just came out yesterday. I think they had 1,000 officers off during 2020. Not all mental health, but a lot of it.
Yeah.
People are shocked by that. Some of it is staffing issues. There's all sorts of stresses in a person's life on the personal side too, not just at work.
Yes.
And they come to work with that baggage and those thoughts. But we're building the system for them to come forward. So when they come forward, let's figure out how we make it better for them.
Yeah.
And these situations, even PTSD, from all the experts, it's a curable situation.
Yeah, you know, police can't say this about themselves, but we can, because we're on the sideline. We see it. We're almost like a link, a gateway, so to say. Empathy is a two-way street. And, you know, we when we can, we like to speak and to share that, to have empathy towards those in policing. I mean, let's look, before we even go into their job, being a 911 operator. I'd seen a movie at TIFF recently, and Jake Gyllenhaal played a character who was a 911 operator. And you sit for 2 hours with him and his team taking and fielding these calls. So, you know, this is kind of to the audience. Imagine what it would be like receiving receiving the phone call.
Right.
You know, imagine like at any moment you're going to get a call about anything, and it's going to require all of you to be able to guide and to get the information and to be able to serve first responders who have to go there. Now, that person who is a 911 operator, being empathetic of their role, they get to, at least they play a part, but they're not there in person. How much more for a first responder, for police who's first on the scene? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, you know what? It's an up and down in those two positions, right? The civilian dispatcher sends the police officer to that situation, and then sits and worries and wonders what's actually happening. What's
going to happen?
Sometimes the officers are injured. We had 2 officers shot 4 or 5 years ago now in a gas station situation. The dispatchers were just as much involved in that, even though they didn't see it. They heard it. It was a first-hand experience for them. So we have to deal with all of those people on the mental health side. But you're also, there's a side to it where there's certainly an adrenaline side, which can be a positive thing, where you are waiting for those things to happen, and you don't know every time 911 rings what it's going to be. Is it a terrible situation, mental health, suicide, robbery in progress? And you've got to be ready for it, and you've got to be calm. And I was just dealing with a professional person who I know in the Halton area who had someone breaking into their house at 1 o'clock in the morning. So they called our dispatcher, and the person was describing to me how calm the dispatcher was and saying, how did she stay so calm? It was just, yes, okay, what's happening now? We have somebody on the way. Can you update us?
That's amazing.
And that calming voice is so important. I think I know the movie you're talking about. It's on Netflix now, and I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I need to.
Yeah.
So it's a plug for it. I should.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and I bring that up just because it's important for the general public to remember to have empathy to the police officer, who in that 12 hours we have no idea what they've endured, and they show up in the 11th hour in a situation. You're driving, walking by, and you're this expert. Oh, you should be doing this. You should, again, you don't know if there's anything. I say this of myself. If I had an opportunity and I saw police actively policing, let's say it's a very messy arrest, there's shouting, there's camera phones, I would try to help the situation. I would try to keep it calm in my, I'm a civilian expert, which I kind of coined last week.
Yeah.
As a civilian expert, okay, knowing the streets, because I have street psychology 101, 102, and 103.
Yeah.
Those are the most important courses.
Yeah, and some points, just being a voice of reason,
right.
And being able to say, look, we don't know the full situation, let them do their job, or like that, and saying, hey, officer, just so you know, they're, if we see the other patrol car come, we'll help them find you. Things like that, that's how you can make a better outcome right? The community can actually help police.
Well, absolutely, and it's a good point. Every time an officer goes somewhere and they're dealing with whatever that situation is, the caller doesn't necessarily care what the officer just dealt with, right?
That's a great point.
They're coming from something else. They probably have not been sitting, resting for 6 hours to come and deal with this situation. But we need to know we're dealing with a person, whatever the crisis is, it's probably the biggest crisis they've ever had. And no matter what it is, it's a stolen car, it's an intimate partner violence situation, it's an attempt suicide of your teenage son or daughter. We need to know that we're dealing with somebody also in crisis, and that's where the empathy and the communication is so important.
Yeah.
And it kind of struck me as one of the other things we do not need to do, or we don't do overly well, is sometimes we cannot be the expert in everything. I remember going with my coach officer in 1982 or early 1983 to a domestic violence situation, and the husband was upstairs, the wife was in the kitchen, I was on the stairs, my partner was in the kitchen, and the husband was coming down the stairs, and I'm 22 years old with red hair, looked like Richie Cunningham, and looking up at this fella.
Ukulele in the back pocket.
I could have, Tiny Tim, looking up at this 45-year-old man and saying, "Hey, I know exactly what you're going through." And he looked at me and said, "You do not have a clue what I'm going through.
Right.
Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have this? Or did you just lose your job?" I said, "No, sir, you're right. I don't have any idea, but we're here to help, and we're here to calm the situation down." So, but we sometimes, there's a pro and a con to hiding behind the uniform, because the uniform is a presence. It should be. It isn't for everybody. We have to understand that too. Sometimes it ramps people up in different ways for different reasons. But when we're there to calm something down, we don't have to understand everything about the individual. We have to be empathetic, and we have to be willing to learn what's going on.
Yeah.
And then put the right steps in place to make it better.
I think there's something that you touched on.
Yeah.
I'll just say it quickly. I love that line for a cop to be able to say, like, we're here to help. I mean, some of the videos that everyone's been privy to see, imagine if the officer, before anything happened, just said, "Here, look, we're here to help.
Yep.
What's happening?" Like, that sets a different tone. Secondly, I think if the public was thinking how to help first responders, we would have different outcomes. Like, truly, I mean, and again, there's obviously deeper things. That means there'd have to be a level of respect and appreciation for what they do. But I actually, because I know I've been, again, being an expert civilian and working the field in security, we know what it's like to really help first responders get a job done, because the stakes are high. It can be life and death sometimes. And sometimes the first responders, we've had a chance where they've been able to say to us as a team, "Thank you. Like, we would not have been able to achieve this outcome this quickly, or be able to figure out what needed to have happened, and the information that you had already compiled it ready for us and to appropriate." And I throw that out there because if the public also took the responsibility, it is your community.
Yeah.
It's where you live every single day. It's like, what happens there, what doesn't happen, and what shouldn't be. And it's it's so easy to judge police from your couch while you're texting your girlfriend watching the Leaf game.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
But-
And the
but-
Leafs are winning.
Yeah. Hey. There's no wood here to knock on. It's okay. But imagine, put the onus, how can you help your own community and help police do a better job at policing? I actually believe there's a territory there that is few have really found right now. But I think it's a two-way street. Police come into a neighborhood sometimes that is not their own.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't have to do it alone. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you know what? It's a good reminder, and we always go back to Peel's principles and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
But there is some real legitimacy to the police are the public, and the public are the police. We are, as we describe sometimes, we're just we're the citizens in this community that are fortunate enough to be paid for what every citizen should be doing.
I've never actually heard that statement. The public are the police.
Yeah,
to a degree.
that's if you go through Sir Robert Peel's principles from a couple hundred years ago, they're quoted all the time now for community safety and well-being plans, and the more complex and rightfully complicated ways that we try to deal with things upstream. But there's a lot of truth to the fact that the police can only really police a community to the degree that the community gives them the authority to do
Oh,
that.
that's great.
That is
Right?
good.
Wow.
So you can't go in, I don't want to say guns blazing, but you can't go in strong all the time. And probably back in the 60s, 70s, we've seen some terrible videos at some museums that are just atrocious on white officers, young black children, and the way they're interacting. And you're appalled. So you can't go into a community and demand respect. You go there and gain the respect, and then the community helps you to solve things. We can't solve homicides and things without people coming forward. It's more often now we're arresting impaired drivers because other citizens are calling us. It used to be just because we found people swerving across lanes.
Yeah, but now you're being notified.
Oh, people are notifying us, and it's because it's culturally not appropriate behavior anymore.
Right.
Properly so, right? So, but when
Yeah,
things are happening,
that's indicators of bigger things that the public can have a pulse on, because it is
Absolutely.
their community. That's awesome.
yeah, and that's where the trust part comes. There's been, in my view, there's been some scary decisions made in recent years when it comes to police officers in schools. Maybe what the schools should have done is give the community a chance to select the officer. Instead of someone being put in there, maybe because they're on light duties or they need to work days, or maybe they wanted to be in the school, but it might not have been the right person for the school. Maybe the school and the parents or whatever could somehow say, let's interview 5 police officers.
That's actually a really good
Let us
point.
pick one, right?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
our officers in Halton are still in the schools. We're proud of that. But ironically, I think they're actually needed more in some other areas in schools. So it's kind of a catch-22. It's
Yeah. Let me ask you this: if you had a wish for one thing to change, for just changing in police, it doesn't have to be for the obviously Halton, but just in general, that maybe it's something that would be, if we had this, it'd be so much better, or if we took away this, it would be so much better. What would that be? I mean, if you had the opportunity.
there's a lot of things. It's
Just one though, right?
Yeah.
You're only offering
I'm
one.
only offering one.
Yeah, just this
one.
week only. Okay.
yeah, it's there's so many things that are needed, and if we think about the community safety and well-being, and the way we've developed our plan in Halton is to involve all different groups at very high levels, so that we can put the right resources into place at the right time, not necessarily police. So the thought behind it is probably 3 or 4 out of 10 situations we're involved in are not police issues. We only deal with crime about 20% of the time now. So 80% is societal issues, right? It's mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, unemployment, all sorts of stresses.
Homelessness.
So we need to flip the switches on, bring all the right decision makers together with the funding, because it's not all policing and it's not all police costs. So behind CSWB this is a mental health addiction issue. Here's the mental CMHA. Here's ADAPT, alcohol and drug addiction people. You people go out and meet with this individual who has issues in the community and deal with it to help them better themselves and get over the issues that are actually causing the police to respond all the time. It's not I do need to say, though, it's not always the mental health stuff, because mental health stuff, as you guys will know professionally, can go bad really quick.
Yes.
And we can send trained psychiatric nurses are awesome. They work with us on our mobile crisis rapid response teams, but we can't have them there all the time because they're not funded. But we need to realize that there are times when, even if there was another organization that was paid $50 million a year to do this in Toronto, they still may be calling the Toronto police half the time because they're concerned about their own safety, they're concerned about the safety of others. So it's very complex. But we do need to download things that are not purely police issues to the right place with the right funding for those people.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, to summarize, it seems like the wish is we all work together.
Yeah.
And find the best people to do the best aspect of, I think, I've never really thought of it, but it should be everyone's mandate to serve and protect in their community, right?
Well, that's the Good Samaritan element, right?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
opposed to pulling out a phone, you know,
Yeah.
jump in and help. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap,
RAP?
RAP.
Wrap up.
Okay.
Okay.
An incredible career in policing. Do you plan on retiring, doing another 10 years? It feels to me like you can go for another 20 easily.
Yeah, the way you're doing it.
Yeah, you know what? I think at least another 5. I have to question my own self beyond that.
Right.
But never say never.
Right.
Because here's the way I've looked at it, and the way I tell our people, I hope they look at it, is if it's there was a thing where it was the University of Alabama brought a sportscaster in to talk to them. And it was a motivational sort of thing. And the sportscaster said, here's the difference. I have a get-to job. I don't have a have-to job. And so I really honestly believe I have not ever had to go to work a day in my life. I've worked. I've done lots of different things, but I've never had to do it. I get to do it. So as long as you get to do it,
fruit of gratitude.
Yeah.
as long as you get to do it, then time's not as important, right? But if you feel at a point that it's a have to, or I'd rather be doing this than going to work, then retirement's right there anytime, right?
I got two closing thoughts on that.
So a few more years.
That's good.
We're going to have our production team find out the longest serving chief of police in Canada. And then that becomes maybe a benchmark goal for you, right?
There we go.
Because the way that you're going about it, you probably could just keep going, which is amazing. I mean, that's kudos to you. Secondly, if you never thought of an alternate career, you should do voiceover work.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could do both at some point. But you got a voice like butter. And, you should be reading books and definitely you should do voiceover.
I know I've dealt with some pretty well-known, long-time radio personalities. And they've got the voices, right? So
yeah,
we'll see. But I appreciate it. It was great getting together with you today. There's so many issues for us to talk about, and it's an honor. Thank you.
No, it's amazing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here today, and we just can't wait for this to go out. And we know, again, a lot of times when people are hearing what we're pushing out, it is to kind of just get the mind moving a little bit more into a different way. And I think we accomplished a lot today. And again, it's a privilege. I want to thank you for what you're doing. You are making a change, and through your leadership, lives are being changed. And I think also lives are being cultivated. And it will also give people listening who want to get into policing a better understanding and a better grasp of what you need to do.
Yeah, and if you're considering Halton, I mean, meeting you gives us an idea of how probably the strength of the force that you have. So
yeah,
it's a pleasure.
We're hiring about 60 or 70 officers a year plus civilians. So come and see us.
Yeah.
Welcome the applications. And just remember, for the greater community, only together we can really make a difference. Right?
Amazing. And housing's a little cheaper out there.
I don't think so.
I'm joking. I know.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great day. And again, thank you so much for coming down.
Yeah,
thank you. You're welcome.
All right.
Amazing.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.